Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy About Nature Podchat series, where I sit down with folks from different backgrounds and experiences to chat all about things pertaining to nature. My name is Ross, and this podcast is an extension of a passion project I started called Nerdy About Nature, which also includes tons of fun educational videos all over Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and basically everywhere else on the internet. Now, all that I create here serves as a means to inspire, educate, and engage folks with the outdoor world so that we can all become better stewards of it, have a little bit more fun when we're out enjoying it, and work to create a more inclusive, diverse, equitable, and just future for each and every one of us in this world that we all share. Because nature, it sure is pretty neat, and I think we should keep it that way. So come on, let's go get nerdy.
Come and take a nature walk with me. We're gonna check out some really cool trees. We're gonna hang around and talk about all those things in nature that we can't live without. Let's go get nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature, baby. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Come on, let's get nerdy about nature.
Yo, what is up, fellow nerds? How's it going? Ross here, your host to Nerdy About Nature, the podcast you are currently tuned into. Today, I've got a really amazing episode for y'all. I sat down and chatted with one of my favorite people of all time, Saya Masso. He's the Lands and Resource Manager for Tla-O-Qui-Aht First Nation, which is loosely kind of around the Tofino or Nechicks area on Vancouver Island, if you're familiar with the area. He's just such a great dude. He's always so warm and welcoming and friendly and happy and just like excited to talk to people. So it made for a really great conversation, and I'm really stoked to share it with you all today. We talked about quite a bit of stuff, ranging, from the history of Tla-O-Qui-Aht Nation, the war in the woods, to the establishment of tribal parks. So what those are, what that means, as well as various aspects of Indigenous stewardship and their plans for the future uses of their lands. So it's a really inspiring model for communities all over Turtle Island, I think, and yeah, I'm really excited to share it with you. Brief note, though, for everybody who is watching this. I dropped my camera like a week or so before this conversation went down, and I don't know exactly what happened. I hit the lens or something, so it hasn't been communicating with the camera properly, so it kept kind of racking in and out of focus, which is a bit of a bummer, because about half of the video is just straight up out of focus. My bad. I had no idea it was doing that. It's, you live and you learn. So apologies for people who are watching this, because it's not going to be the most engaging watch, but the audio is still crisp and clear, and Saya says some really amazing things. So without any further ado, let's get into it. What's up?
Hey, great to see you.
So good seeing you. We've been trying to line this up for years now.
Yeah, really happy to connect with you finally.
Yeah, great day. Beautiful day. Would you like to start first by introducing yourself, maybe a little bit about yourself and where we are right now?
Sure. Well, Uklasish Sayachipis. People know me as Saya from the Masso family. I live in Opitsit on MIRS Island. I'm a husband, a father. I am the Lands and Resource Manager for Tla-O-Qui-Aht First Nation, and that has me implementing the Tla-O-Qui-Aht Land Vision, managing our Tribal Park Guardian program, and then helping establish that. Trying to recover our salmon runs and with our salmon hatchery and fishery program. And we're here today in the village of Asawasta Taistanis. We're on the Schooner Trail, as it's known. The formerly known as Schooner Trail.
I was just going to say the former Schooner Trail. We tried walking down there just a little bit, and it's definitely a little bit derelict and disrepair there.
Yeah, wind-blown trees crashing over it, so it's not traversable anymore. So
it sounds like you've got a ton going on, which I know you do. You just listed off so many different things that you're trying to do. Like, how long have you been in this role, and how'd you kind of get into it?
I moved home to work my master's thesis, which was like self-governance, constitution drafting stuff, and trying to frame our historical governance structures in a modern constitution kind of framework. That was 2001, and 2006 and onward was part of the treaty negotiation team, which was wrought with problems, and it was at some point it became against my principles to be part of the treaty process, because it was always extinguish rights and title, cede and surrender rights and title. So I left that, and shortly after leaving the treaty program, our leadership asked me to stay on board with the nation and be part of our lands department, which was in charge of responding to referrals, implementing, asserting our rights and title while the treaty process continued on. And it was thereafter, shortly after, a couple years after, we declared our second tribal park in 2008. And then 2013, a subsequent tribal park in Tranquil Inlet in response to Imperial Metals' ambitions to exploratory drill there. 30th anniversary of MIRS Island in 2014, we declared our whole territory a tribal park, and onward into now our Tribal Park Allies program and implementing our land vision, which, there's a lot of stories about how to arrive at a land vision as well, and outwardly communicate it. But that's where I've been, and been home for 20 plus years.
Yeah, it feels good to be home.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. As much as, I would have plans and have done things differently, but we have to bring the community along. It has to be the nation's input. It has to be the nation's land vision. There are leaders that need to say, yes, this is what we want you to do. So there's a lot of engagement of the nation and leadership, which is good, because then I feel like I'm supported in anything that I'm doing, that I'm not just out there, haphazardly, that I know that the nation and leadership want me to speak this way or to address this file in this manner. So it's a lot of work, but it feels good. And the work that I do will be left behind for our grandchildren, and that's worth more than anyone can really pay me.
Yeah, that's got to feel really good to be doing that, especially as a father. You mentioned like being able to work managing the resources and the lands for the future generations, especially at a time when we're focused so much as a society about like how do we rebuild these connections and continue these stewardship models in a way that isn't just purely extractive for some sort of capitalist profit. And I mean, everything again that you just listed there, so many things that has happened in this nation for the past, since time immemorial, but the past 30, 40 years really have set it up to be in what I find to be a pretty inspiring example of being able to assert control over your traditional Halhuthi and be able to take back control of these lands and resources.
It is quite the hand that we've created to work with. I'll not say the hand we've been dealt, because it took a lot of previous leaders to create the hand we're working with today. The MIRS Island Aboriginal title case, Tribal Park Declaration, subsequently was declared after the Aboriginal title case in the Supreme Court of Canada. And then but everything, even like our green energy, fossil fuel free energy that supplies the Tofino region. We have 3 of those run of river projects. That's a lot of money to build those, and each one of those can fund 2,000 homes with electricity of green energy without fossil fuels burning. And that's Ucluelet, Tofino, and Ahousaye. Like the whole region lives on green energy with what we've built. But our leadership had to put their neck on the line to fund them. They had to guarantee loans to make that happen. And I'm just grateful to everybody. And it's never just me or my work. There's so many people's shoulders that I'm standing upon to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's Canoe Creek, Winchie Creek, and where's the third?
Haaksuk is right after Sutton Pass. There's a little offshoot, and then you can see a bridge going across.
Right.
8 kilometers up there.
Okay, and so that's all part of this kind of broader
land vision.
Yeah,
land vision. We envision these little footprints on the mountain for green energy, and a hatchery here, and we envision restoration there and protection there, and a woodlot there.
I wish we had a map right now and you could be putting these out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for people who don't know, this part of the world was kind of the focal point of the War in the Woods back in the 90s. I mean, do you want to give me a brief rundown of what went down there? I mean, the MIRS Creek thing in like late 80s, like just for people who might not be familiar with it.
Yeah, so I guess after the 80s, the MIRS Island was protected and an injunction was put on logging on MIRS Island.
Why did that come about?
So at the time, McMillan-Bodell had plans to take 900,000 cubic meters a year for like 3 years and clean MIRS Island off.
Basically clear cut
it brown to the soil, yeah. And that didn't sit well with us, our village right there on MIRS Island, and our leadership, our families took it together to go and stand and go and live out where they would land their boats, and started an Aboriginal title case, and a lot of Nuchannel fundraised to help that happen. It took 5 years, $5 million in 1984 is like $13 million now.
Jeez.
We explained how we have title. It wasn't a court case of how to log or when to log or where and when and how much to take. It was who has the right to issue a permit to log. And we explained our regalia, our crests, our longhouse crests, and our continued use of the land, our songs, our place names. And it came time for the province to show how they have jurisdiction. They could not provide a stitch of evidence. And so they said, let's put an injunction on logging, and let's negotiate this thing that you've shown as Aboriginal title in the Supreme Court of Canada. Let's negotiate it. And so for the first time since 1854, did BC have to start a treaty process again. BC abandoned treaty making in 1854 with the 6 Douglas treaties. So at no time did we see a treaty agent come up here and meet our chiefs and sign existence of BC or Canada into this land. And so that existed to 84, and we began negotiating treaties after 84. But meanwhile, they moved their effort to log in Kennedy, and they got away with some of the clear cutting in the Black Hole where the standoffs happened in 93, and the band Midnight Oil performed there, and that got a lot of attention. I think Canada's largest civil unrest, the most amount of people jailed in a day or something, like 850 people got jailed over those protests. And
up until Fairy Creek. Fairy Creek has been the recent thing that beat that. But
they were no longer in the record books of that.
Yeah. The second place is still pretty good when it comes to civil disobedience.
I won't say it's something we're pursuing as a record. But after the attention of that, the BC government awarded the tree farms to the 5 nations in Tla-O-Qui-Aht Sound, and they said, you guys show us how to log. We're done fighting about it. We'll give the tree farm to you guys. And then it began a process of trying to negotiate the type of logging, and science panel regulations were formed.
And this is back in the 90s.
Yeah. And all of our elders went toe-to-toe against biologists and foresters, and we couldn't agree. And we ended up after 40 days saying, okay, we'll accept science panel as a minimum, knowing that we wanted, science panel still allowed 70% of a cup lock to be taken.
Back then, yeah.
It's still, you could still harvest in the tree farm after we owned it. You could still harvest and take 70% of the trees and leave 30% as buffers. And it took us a long time on our own research and articulating what our elders were trying to get done when they were establishing science panel, negotiating against foresters and biologists, that you start to affect biodiversity if you take more than 25% of an entry on a cup lock. And when you take 25% to not affect biodiversity, you should take a cross section of that watershed. If the watershed has 10% balsam and 20% hemlock and 40% cedar, when you take 25%, that 25% should be made up of the same percentage of the watershed, so that
of all those trees.
Yeah. So that
not just taking all the cedar.
Not take all the best. Yeah. Then you end up leaving all these other trees to proliferate, and then you've changed the biodiversity. So that type of logging is nearly impossible under the tree farm system. And so while we negotiated these new principles to operate from and regulations, we still had tree farm rent to pay, the right to cut. And so if you're paying $400,000 a year for the right to cut and all these tenures and leases, how many old growth trees do you need to fall just to get back to zero? It was, and we operated a tree farm for 20 plus years after 93. For a long time we operated it.
ESOC?
ESOC, yeah. And Mammoth Forest Company, ESOC Forest Company.
And all that money just goes to Ministry of Forests.
The rent every year.
Yeah. The rent.
Yeah, the rent, and then you still per tree pay stumpage that you share the center of the province.
So you're paying rent on your own land just to exist.
Yeah.
And then you're using the science panel to like create some sort of buffer. But like, were there any considerations for cultural uses? Like, was there any voice there? Like, was it recognized?
There was always there were layers and maps, mapping layers for marbled muralet and mapping layers for all these different principles, and then that would establish some reserves that were needed. The cultural maps were often guarded and kept, and Tla-O-Qui-Aht's cultural maps were just like a lot of shoreline. All the rivers and waters were sacred to us, and we didn't reveal like burial sites or other shrines or other things in the territory where we would just draw too much attention. So on a case-by-case basis, so Science Panel allowed that cultural protected areas may be established on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, and I would argue that what we were doing recently, last month, making cultural protected areas, conservancies, was exactly that. It was Science Panel. It was like, we finally are going to articulate that the survival of our culture needs these old growth with the whole watersheds protected. And that's kind of what we've done now. And it was, we used Science Panel. We used the strength of what was done in the 90s, and it's just never been done before. And we've never said we want to be compensated for pulling this out of the tree farm and making protected area, and it needs to be. And it wasn't a little spot in the mountain to protect a shrine or a burial cave or something. It was now the survival of our culture. Our culture can't survive on second growth. You can't carve dugout canoes or longhouse beams or totem poles on second growth. There's too many knots in it. At an old growth cedar, you won't see the first branch for 40, 50 feet up there. And that's that good wood for carving and doing our culture.
Well, and beyond just the trees as a resource, like the forest ecosystem, the biodiversity, you can't hunt, you can't forage, like all the foods, like everything is like dependent on these mature ecosystems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I guess that brings us to the recent announcement. So do you want to share that? What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you want to celebrate it really quickly?
Yeah. Well, it took 40 years for BC to implement what was originally articulated by our elders in 1984. So after the court case in 1984, our elders we're going to negotiate the existence of Aboriginal title into Canada. And they did a one-page declaration called the MIRS Island Tribal Park Declaration. And it described the rights of Tla-O-Qui-Aht to hunt and gather and medicinal plants. But
just on MIRS? On MIRS,
yeah.
None of the surrounding...
At that point, this was only to negotiate, to settle the court case discussion. And it talked about what is protected on MIRS Island, the ancient forests and everything else, and the mud flats on front of MIRS Island to hunt waterfowl. And then the last section in the 84 declaration talked about we acknowledge, the interest of non-natives' need for the mariculture licenses and drinking water. And so we modernized that in 2024 on the 40th anniversary to talk about the what is protected in all of our territory, because now by 2024 our whole homeland is declared a tribal park. When you said is it only for MIRS? Yes, subsequently we declared more tribal parks in each of our management units or all of our watersheds, until finally in 2024 everything has been declared a tribal park, which is how to share Aboriginal title lands. This is kind of what it articulates. And so we went about a process of vision exercising. What is important to you? Where do you see in your homeland needs to be rebuilt and restored? Where it needs to be protected? And quite naturally out of that, from engaging our citizens and open houses in the region, it was quite obvious that everyone would support us protecting our old growth forests. And then since 2014, we began fundraising with Nature United and NGOs to be able to buy out the tree farm and make protected areas. And it took that long, quite a few years there, 2014 and onward, till finally we had enough to address the stakeholders that own the tree farm and then get the board of directors to surrender the tree farm to BC, and at the same hand, BC returns it back to us in the form of conservancies. So that was a lot to stick handle, yet it and the protected areas encompassed the other areas that we visioned, Clay River Valley and Tranquil Inlet and Tofino Inlet. But it also included, big portions of MIRS Island. So it's almost as if it took 40 years to negotiate a suitable tenure that would recognize MIRS Island Tribal Park. And it finally happened just this, a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that extends all the way down to Kennedy Flats and...
Yeah.
Of the Taylor, or sorry, not Taylor, but the Kennedy River.
The upper Kennedy River. So the Order in Council at the legislature, we called it the first phase, Order in Council number 1, which is all the low-hanging fruit. We could get before legislature breaks for the summer, we can get it passed in legislature, June. But to do that, we had to submit a map that was kind of like Swiss cheese. It was like all the low-hanging fruit of protected areas, no arguments about jurisdictions, no tenures that are unresolved, no claims, no right-of-ways. So the map looks like there's a right-of-way for exploratory hydrology, water studies, or imperial metals in Tranquil Inlet. There's a big square area pulled out there. All the island timberlands land, fee simple forest lands, that's pulled out. That's not included in the protected areas. All the Upper Kennedy is BC timber supply area. It curves Upper Kennedy and down the highway. That's not included, but we hope that will come to the table now that we have more time next year to do Order in Council number 2, and hopefully, we won't need Order in Council number 3. Hopefully by next year we'll resolve the mineral claims and all the island timberlands, but I might need to do some more fundraising for that to buy out, stakeholders.
So I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. So Order in Council 1, you basically had to fundraise to buy the rights back to the logging tenures on your land. They weren't just given back by
the company
or by the federal government.
Well, it would be provincial, being
right,
terrestrial.
BC. Yeah.
But it's that, there's corporate owners, there's shareholders that own the tree farm, and they should be treated like business people as anyone else being forced to or being requested to resolve Aboriginal conflict, to be paid out as business people, fair market value. And
so there was no ethics. There was no this is the right thing to do. Here you go. It was just we'll take it at fair market value.
Ethics were that they were willing to and not continue to push for their right to log. Right. There was no resistance there. When they saw our letter that we want them to support our land vision, which will mean them surrendering tenures, their board, accepted that, subject to fair market, being treated like business people.
Right. Yeah. And so now the plan is to continue that by just buying out the last those holes in that Swiss cheese that you mentioned, the imperial metals. And
I would hope, imperial metals. That should be, I hope, an easy one. Their tenure has lapsed. They've spent 10 years and it's up for renewal. So it shouldn't be renewed. Mosaic or Island Timberlands, I hope they're a willing seller, willing buyer, and I can achieve the funding to do so. BC Timber Supply, it's a government tenure to test stumpage values, stumpage rates. That we hope should be just here's for $1, here's your new conservancy. Yeah. It's a government tenure. It shouldn't cost anyone any money to send that over to a conservancy.
Right. And that's the stuff all up the Kennedy watershed. Yeah. So what are the biggest challenges in dealing with all this stuff? This is immensely time consuming, immensely energy consuming.
Keeping a land vision, comprehensive. I don't know. I have tribal park planning document. It used to look like here's a map of our whole homeland, and I'd put red stickers where there's an issue, green stickers where I know the file is going well, yellow ones where it's advancing well enough, but there's still some issues. But the map could be everything from here's crabbing that's happening without our involvement, or here's float home issues. oh, here's a broken river, and everything was identified, and that's just there's a tremendous amount. Like there's hundreds of line items of things that we're trying to remedy, or relationships,
just issues that you need to address.
Yeah. And having a clear picture of that, and so it's a map, but now we've converted that to a spreadsheet, and it's each tribal park. Here's Kennedy Lake, and you can look at Kennedy Lake, and through the spreadsheet assign it to a piece in the map of where here's an illegal dump site, or here is Marion Creek Hydro, who's been actively generating electricity without a benefits agreement to us. They're using our river to the exclusion of us, and yet we wrote a letter of support contingent upon a benefits agreement, and they never concluded. They've had almost their whole tenure generating electricity on one of our best rivers for electricity, and they do so without an agreement with us. So that's a red flag on our map, and then it's a red flag on it. And so you got to keep. And some of them, this is the file, this is the problem, and this is our long run goal is to get a benefits agreement, or our long run goal is to close down an illegal dump site. Well, I give 3 steps: short, medium, and run. And the very next step is, send guardians to clean up the dump site, or email regional district to find out who, whatever it is in the medium run step. And so just like keeping a clear mind on and taking them one piece at a time often is just, what is the next step? Yeah. Email ACRD, and I'll put that in, and there, emailed ACRD July 27th, and it may, through attrition, I may not see that again until I get a response for them, or
like months down the line.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. So you're just taking it one step at a time, just managing all these different things.
Yeah, almost every minute of the day.
and you talk about lands, but it's the waters as well, like the float homes. And so it's basically you just have all these things that have happened on Tla-O-Qui-Aht lands in the last 150 years without your involvement, that you're now trying to just be a part of these conversations. It's not like you're necessarily shutting everything down, and because I think there's a real big fear with a lot of people when it comes to the idea of land back and right. The idea of taking things away. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case at all. It's just being in on the conversation.
Yeah, being
having
involved,
decision making.
Hopefully steering it towards something that minimizes impact to Tla-O-Qui-Aht grandchildren. Yeah, our involvement, participation, and like you said, it's everything from kelp fields. Trying to see the otter return so that kelp fields return to our homeland, and it's all encompassing, ocean floor to mountaintops, and clean water and air, everything. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Unresolved relationships with land tenures like the airport, or knowing which rivers are broken, or where the second growth stands are, where they're choked out our forest. And I look at areas in the Pacific Rim Park and second growth. And our laws are that you would go out every year and fix rivers, and you would bring spawning fish to other rivers that aren't producing, and you'd send people every year, and you'd not walk away from it. And BC and Canada, like DFO or investment in forests, they just walk away. And I look at Tranquil and that, where we've done a lot of work, and you could leave, they logged right up to the river's edge, and every in a rainforest, the high rains would pull all the boulders off the wall into the river. Now the river's full of boulders, and you could wait 400 years of flashy rains to wash all the boulders down and get it finally back to a nice ancestral channel. Or we could go in and every year go in and fix up the gravel bar and open up the channel again and do all this work, and maybe turn that 400 years into 85 years. And the same with second growth forest. Go in and space those trees. There should be more sunlight coming into this forest stand, and this is a federal park. Is the federal park meant, we don't touch it.
Mm-hmm. Hands off.
Yeah, that's not our way, and nor should it be theirs. Why? If you know that you could turn this recovery into 85 years, don't you think you should go in and space some of the trees in that second growth? And so we push on that, but there's just countless things when you look at every tribal park. There's problems in each one, and I have an intimate knowledge of it, and I try and get all my staff, all the guardians, to have the same knowledge. What is the issues in every tribal park? But yeah, it's a lot to understand and take on.
Well, it's like we were talking earlier too, just like when these organizations have budget surpluses, like, oh, we need to spend this money this year because we don't know if we'll do it again, and they need to like spend it in order to get the budget next year. It's this weird cycle where they're stuck in doing things that they committed to doing, even though they might not be the best use of that money or energy or resources. And like the parks thing kills me. It's so funny for anybody who's like familiar with this area. You have to drive through what's known as Cathedral Grove before you get to Port Alberni to get here. And it's this amazing part on the highway because the trees are towering over the highway. Like you can't even see the sky, and it's gorgeous. And then you come down on the other side of Kennedy Pass and you pass the lake and you're winding through these roads, and you go up towards Nechix to Tofino, and there's forest on either side. And everybody who's not from here, the tourist people who come out, it's like a massive draw to see this much forest, and everybody just assumes that it's healthy. But if you know a forest, it's like maybe 20 meters tall, and everything's just super tight, super dark. And like you said, it's federal, so like they're not gonna go through and thin it and make it a healthy forest. But historically, those forests would have been bigger than the Cathedral Grove. Like that would have blocked the sky. You look at some of the stumps that are in Kennedy Flats, and it's like 3 meters across. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And there's just like there's no it's just like the shifting baseline. Like we just don't know what we've lost at this point. So it's really hard to tell people about, or to get people on board with this idea of, stewarding these lands in a way that makes them healthier. And the end goal is going to be something that sounds like it's out of a fantasy book because we haven't seen it in 100 years.
Right. Yeah. It's weird to think like, you have to convey to someone that, when you log that old growth, you'll never see an old growth tree there again. Like you're going to have to wait 1,200 years.
Yeah, and you're not going to be there for that.
To have to make that point is weird. It should be. And more with climate change, it's obvious what old growth forests do, and it's pretty salient in Tofino, or if people do know, I guess a lot of people don't know that Tofino gets its drinking water from MIRS Island, and it's owed to the old growth forest, that there's still water trickling in those creeks, and it hadn't rained since February. And you got, and I think about, man trying to solve the climate change problem and using technology, and they probably want filters on skyscrapers filtering bad chemicals out of the air, and it's like, are you talking about you're wanting 100-meter tall filter? It's called an old growth tree. Like and Tofino's drinking water on the Big Tree Trail on MIRS Island, and there's a creek it's always trickling water in, and it hasn't rained in forever. I know in the big drought year, and it's just these trees that are just covered in moss, and they're just drinking from the mist and the fog, and after it hits the tree, gravity's doing the rest, and it's feeding into the soil and trickling down. And Tofino has flowing water because of that, and it's that intact ecosystem, and yet people take it for granted if they're not educated about it.
Right. And like I said, like it's so far removed from like the reality that we see around us, where we don't even recognize a healthy forest ecosystem because we're so used to just seeing second growth. We're like, oh, that's what forest is, but it's not.
Yeah, I see trees. That's a healthy forest.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even that, the pollutants in the water, like that's just like one kind of anthropocentric, like one human perspective on it. And you think about all the different things that depend on that within this forest ecosystem, from the other plant species down to the salmon in the creeks, and the way that these trees depend on those salmon in the creeks in order to have the nitrogen that makes them grow big and strong. Like everything is part of this like reciprocal relationship. And when we've divided everything into these industries, from fishing to logging, it's just everything becomes siloed, and you don't see that interconnection anymore. And that's what I think is so powerful about what you guys have done with this recent announcement, with everything, with the tribal parks finally kind of coming into fruition, where it's like we are looking out for the health and longevity of these systems, where everything's connected.
Yeah, it's been, like even salmon trying to recover kelp fields because we know that that's good for salmon and getting salmon returning to rivers. Welcoming the sea otter home because we know that that's returning kelp fields. Trying to resolve boat traffic over eelgrass so that we don't scare away the herring during whale fest. The whales are coming for herring, and the boats are going out every 5 minutes, and they're scaring away herring. And herring is a feeder fish for Chinook. And so it's all connected and all that. We're trying to get fish back to the river that will feed the trees, that these trees don't drop leaves. So they need the nitrogen from salmon. And without a big salmon runner, our forests will show signs of suffering. But yeah, it's so intricately connected. Right from otter to herring to salmon to trees. It's wild.
To all of us.
Yeah.
So what do you think has made, because Canada is a big place. North America, Turtle Island is a massive chunk of land. Why is this such a rare thing? What has put Tla-O-Qui-Aht in the position to be where it is today?
Yeah, I know it has a lot to do with 1984. The existence of a tribal park declaration. Without that, I mean, we would be relying on our teachings of our elders of everything is connected and our laws of respect. But to have a zone called MIRS Island, it's Supreme Court of Canada, it's forced to be reconciled with.
Right.
And, it's harder to tell people, come on, respect our laws of Isak, of respect. Respect our laws of Hishikitsawak, that everything is connected. It's holistic, and we're articulating these principles. But to say, no, here is a map, here's Aboriginal title land. In it, there's all these principles. And by the way, those principles exist on these islands, in these lakes. But to have that fought in the Supreme Court of Canada did give us a good tool to work from. Without it, you're trying to educate. You don't have the strength of that hole in the map. Says, what are we doing with this? And BC had no tree farms to cut and log on MIRS Island, and here it is standing as a pillar of protected area and providing drinking water for a $400 million economy. It becomes salient at that point. Canada would have logged all that. Without this map that shows it's a tribal park, it would have been logged. So it's hard not to say that was a big jumping point, a tool.
Right.
I feel, when we reinvested in tribal parks, because we spent 20 years negotiating treaties and voted two of them down, one in 2000 and one in 2011, which were cede and surrender, extinguishment, and
what do you mean by that?
It's the first treaty was like a 600-page binder, and you'd open the binder up, and the first paragraph on the title page would say all Aboriginal rights will be extinguished and replaced with the rights herein. And then what you would do is you select a map, and you'd say, well, on these chunks of land that you've selected, treaty settlement lands, on these chunks of land, you'll have these rights spelled out to you. You will extinguish your rights everywhere else, but we will give you these new treaty rights on these lands. The other one, cede and surrender, was it's different. At the end of every chapter, child welfare or mineral claims or sub-tenures, sub-mineral, subsurface, and forestry, at the end of every chapter would say, if there's a conflict of law in this chapter, federal and provincial laws will supersede. Therefore, we found a different way of saying we extinguish Aboriginal rights, and that doesn't sit well. We just went to court to say we have equal crown jurisdiction to say no to your crown jurisdiction that wanted to log it. So why would we ever on earth sign that treaty? And we went about 20 years in taking loans, borrowing loans to negotiate Canada's treaty with us.
For lawyer fees and stuff.
Yeah, and to pay for your table, your people to be there, and traveling to meetings, and it was unreal.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the system's set up in a way to not make it easy for anybody to fight back.
No, that's for sure.
And fight back is a strong wording. It's just to stand up for their right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it shouldn't be such a conflict when dialogue is what's wanted. Recognition, crown to crown. It's already government to government relationship. It's already articulated that way. How come it has to be so one-sided? Educating the common people to know that this is unceded land helps. When there aren't as many constituents saying, this is Canada, we don't need to recognize First Nation rights. And it's like, well, no, actually, this is unceded land. You should learn the history that there's actually very strong demonstrated rights, that they have a right to say no to this tree farm. But jumping off of the 1984 work and 2008, our second tribal park, and honing that and doing open houses with all the citizens in Tofino regarding their input into what do you value in Kennedy Lake? What is important to you in Kennedy Lake? And the same would be done in 2013 for Tranquil Inlet, and asking the citizens in the region to have input into our tribal park planning, I feel was important. And to publicly declare and show the goodwill and intent of our tribal park is a model for sharing and protecting. And we've been that way since 84, but then again in 2008, 2013, 2014, each declaration. And then just this past summer here in 2024, our chief signed a new declaration. It's nice. We translated it into Tla-O-Qui-Aht language on one half the page in English. It looks like a real
cool
federal document
Yeah.
you'd see on the wall in Ottawa in French and English, but it's Tla-O-Qui-Aht in English. And it modernized the Tribal Park Declaration and recommitted with all our chief signatures. And it's still broken into Tla-O-Qui-Aht rights, and then what is protected in our homeland, these lakes, waters, islands, and the deep ocean floors, and for non-natives, we're asking people, there's been 10,000 years of protocols here that if you're a business, please sign up to be a tribal park ally. Like for 10,000 years, our Hotway have been participate in the resources of our homeland, and in the winter they potlatch and they feed our people. This was our society structure, and that has existed for 10,000 years. Our right to benefit. We jealously controlled trade with schooners that came in from Spain and Britain and America, and we participated in every economy to feed our people. Our chiefs would do that, and we're explaining in our new declaration that, hey, if you're a business, please follow our protocols that have existed for 10,000 years and sign up to be a tribal park ally, where a piece of their client's stay will come back to Tla-O-Qui-Aht and grandchildren. And if you're a visitor to the tribal parks, please try and live up to the pledge, our ESOC pledge, on how to respectfully access our tribal parks. And so that's how it's articulated in our modern tribal park declaration. And it's really beautiful, and I think it will stand the test of time on how to share Aboriginal title lands and welcome people here, but yet still put it outwardly facing. And ever since 2008, we have maps up on the web of what our vision is for our territory, and just try and create buy-in and allies and create people advocating for us as well.
And it's a lifetime at work. I mean, you can only move as fast as, like, what's the quote? Like, you can only move at the speed of understanding. I think that's Gary Merkel, it's like, if you were to dump what we have today on the people back in 1984, they would have freaked out, because it would have been so radically different. But you need that time to get buy-in, get people supporting it, and kind of down with the idea, or at least understanding the nuances of it.
Yeah, a lot of that would have sounded foreign to people in 84.
Right.
Tenure reform, carbon credits.
And so the tribal parks, because that costs money to run too. So you have the tribal parks, and you have the tribal parks guardians, which are the people who steward and go through and deal with all the issues and stuff. And that costs money to run. How are you guys funded?
Well, in 2008, when we declared our second tribal park, it was the first time it would also, in the declaration, it said that guardians will oversee or monitor our tribal parks. It said for the first time also that to implement our land vision, we will use any tool in our toolkit to make it a reality, such as tenure reform and carbon credits and ecosystem service fees. We didn't know what that was yet, but it was also the same year that Tofino signed up to be a resort municipality and start collecting a 2% hotel tax, right when we said, well, we want a 1% tax for our ecosystems. These ecosystems serve us with salmon and drinking water and tourism opportunities, and we want a 1% fee in the region to recognize it so we don't have to log it and such. And it just didn't come out of the gates very well with a new hotel tax announced that year. in 2008, our guardians come on the land, and we were collecting fees on the Big Tree Trail. It was like $5 if you took a fossil fuel boat, $3 if you paddled in. And
I didn't know you had levels with that. That's cool.
Yeah, well, 2008.
Yeah, progressive.
And that would give us, some years 12 grand, 15 grand, 18, biggest year 20 grand at most. I don't remember if it ever got that big, but you would wait so long into summer before you collected enough revenues to hire a guardian, and that was brutal. Because you'd get enough money collected from a few people on the trail. Now I can hire guardians in July when they should have been on the trail, upgrading the trail, fixing it in February. So that was a tough wheel to be on. Writing grants, write a grant, 10 grand, 15, 20 grand here and there, and you don't have assets, you don't have a truck but it was so critically important to just keep going at it, write the grants, take volunteers to help build the trail, but getting visibility, professionally training guardians. Every cohort of 12 that you go to train on, every course, stream keepers, wilderness first aid, chainsaw course, vessel operators.
Those are expensive courses.
Environmental monitoring. Yeah. Every one of those are 15 grand to get a professor out for 4 days to do it. And if you can't keep them hired through winter, they're well trained to go get jobs elsewhere. So you need a living wage annually, and you need money for training, and it's not cheap. And it was a brutal few years of grant writing, and until we had a couple year grant sustained for longevity and then our allies program came on board in 2018, 2019, and 2020. We started to actually get a little more regular donations from the region businesses. Still much more to do, and I don't think we still collect enough from allyship to fund a full guardian program.
Mm-hmm. But that's primarily where it's coming from now. That's kind of the goal.
We're just wrapping up, or we wrapped up this fiscal year a 2-year grant for guardians, and we'll continue to write grants. The money from allies, ultimately, we'd love to see it be going towards some of the infrastructure that we had foregone in 1984, the longhouse that we wish we had, a gymnasium to play basketball in, an athletic hall.
Opitsit?
A longhouse in Opitsit, probably an athletic hall at Taistanas. Mm-hmm. But our language survival, that costs money to fund our language programs.
And that's basically just Deb and like one or two others?
Yeah, there's I think a team of 4 to 6. But it needs sustained effort, to keep our language going, and still so much more work to be done there. They had a dismal funding announcement for language this year. It's not approved yet. We don't know where the money's coming from yet to fund our language survival. So we're stepping up and trying to send some money towards language programs from the money we've collected. So when we had enough money collected for guardians, or grants that we wrote, what we've done is we're trying to keep next year's fund for guardians certain, and anything over and above that we can send out towards other services needed in the nation.
You're feeding the families.
Yeah, yes. Well, there's so much more. Like Opitsit's a gravel road. It could be paved. There's a roof over the basketball court in Opitsit. It's a small little half court thing, and we need to be able to doing something. So a repository, a museum to repatriate our artifacts. We want a maternity ward in Tofino to bear children in our homeland again. And that's salient because in 1960 we built that tiny little hospital because all the loggers and the barge companies and the forest company and everyone donated their time to do that cut block on the front of MIRS Island. And you could see that one chunk of second growth with the little rock slide. It's growing up pretty good, but that's good history to know that we had to deforest to build that hospital, and we got a $400 million economy. And Tla-O-Qui-Aht is saying we can't even bear children in the hospital at home here anymore. We need to build a new hospital, or we need to at least reopen the maternity ward. and let's fund it. Is this a funding issue? This is wrong. We have a great homeland producing a good economy. We need to do better, and then we need to be built into the economy so that we will steward this stuff then if no one else is. Yeah. So that's when our allies program, the money doesn't go to LNG, doesn't go to Ottawa or Victoria. It stays here in the little money that we have collected. We're putting money into lunch programs at school, so no kid goes to school hungry or has to ask for a lunch. Funding some of our culture programs, our language or drumming circles. And of course, we've put some money into salmon hatcheries in the region as well to try and get our rivers recovered.
And a lot with restoration. So it feels silly to me that not every business is an ally. Like, so basically, to become a Tribal Parks ally as a business, you just sign up and then it's 1% of your profits or sales, or
you add 1% to the business,
and that just funds Tribal. Like, how is that not just like a prerequisite for any business operating?
It is a prerequisite for new businesses, but if they're already existing here, because when they need a permit from us, we'll require it. But if they're already just getting permits issued by Tofino annually or whatever it is,
I mean, 1% is nothing. Like, you look at like what the provincial taxes are taking. It's
I know,
like 1% is nothing.
13%.
Yeah.
And we're asking
what's one more on top of that?
And you know, people wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, people wouldn't balk at it if you were in Hawaii or New Zealand and a piece is going to the Maori Tribal Council, or it's just like, it just doesn't seem misunderstood. But I know where we are as an organization is that it needs to make business sense for them to sign on. It's a human. It's Tla-O-Qui-Aht's human right in the UN Declaration. It's a human right for Indigenous people to benefit from the use of their traditional lands, and that's what I'm talking about. But I have to go knock on doors to get our human right recognized, and that's wrong. It's insulting. It's infuriating. But I can't go and jump up and down and scream and trash talk non-allies. We need to stay focused on the good path. This is a win-win model. The ally businesses get to tell their clients that a portion of their stay goes towards stewardship and a longhouse that we're trying to build in the region. The client gets to feel like they had ethical travel on their vacation, and the Guardian program feels good because we're being recognized for and being able to be funded for stewardship. So we need to stay in that corner. As dumbfounding as it is that a business would exist here, benefit from the drinking water from MIRS Island, and not want to contribute to what the cost it was to provide that drinking water, the foregone longhouse, the foregone athletic hall. It is bewildering to me. It's infuriating, but I got to play the long game, and we got to stay focused on the good win-win and try and make a good. When more people hear of the success of allies, or when more clients are asking them, why aren't you an ally? I want to pay. I want to pay an extra $1 on my $100 drink tab to know that I had ethical travel when I was on my vacation, And the more people that go to businesses saying, why aren't you an ally? I want to pay it. The more of that, the better. The more businesses are going to say it's, hey, we gotta sign up to be a Tribal Park ally, because they've got billboards everywhere, they're marketing everywhere, they got good social media, they're advertising. Tourism Tofino is now a website designed to usher people towards ally businesses, and we're getting better at the game.
Yeah. Well, people don't often understand or think about the fact that it's a trade-off. It's like you either support this, or it's like these people like have to make money somehow, and then it's usually like resource extraction. It's like, do we want to log things, or do we want to support the not logging of things? People like, you want to have like wood furniture and wood in your house, but you don't want to pay the extra money it takes to get that wood sustainably. It's like there are trade-offs. It's like you have to support the people doing good if you want to live in that kind of good world,
Yeah. I'd pondered the economics of forestry for quite a long time. Like, even the maintenance of the road to Rainbow Beach that campsite forestry, it's the gravel road only gets graded because of active logging. And when people complain about the bumps in the road, they're, well, I guess we're going to approve some cut blocks. Like, if it's $100,000 a year to grade that road 5 times or whatever it is, tourism should be paying that.
Because that's who's using it more often than the loggers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do we not want it, or do we want it? Or if we had the retention levels so high at 70% where we wouldn't be impacting biodiversity, but then we would have had to lower the rents on the tree farm so that they could actually do some lower footprint logging. We had countless times where they'd lay out cut blocks in these little streams that would flow into a bigger one, and they'd have cut blocks laid in between them, and our survey team would go out and they'd come back and they'd say, didn't really find any big cultural concerns, but why don't we approve these 3 but tell them to come back for this cut block in 5 years? And then we bring to the company to say, no, the success of this plan means we take all 4 of those blocks. I need to build the helipad, I need to do this and that, or when I build a 6-kilometer road, I need to take all the trees. I can't, it doesn't work without it. And it was like that all the time. And it's like, can we find a better way to do forestry, to subsidize it or make it? And
well, it is subsidized. It's subsidized like crazy is the thing, but it's just like that model is what's subsidized. It's just like more efficient to do it this one way than it is to have to work a little bit harder and think a little bit differently and just do things a little bit better. It's like, why bother when like it's basically being handed to you the way it is by the federal government? Like, there's no incentive to do anything different.
No, and the trees are worth so much. I just never. We wrestled with the economy of forestry all the time, and it's like
I don't get it.
If and even like if you're gonna do that cut block, you should only do it if you can also leave $10 a cubic meter for the nations whose territory you're gonna negatively impact. And still pay your shareholders and pay all that. But if you can't take that cut block and leave $10 a cubic meter for the nations whose area, and then don't do it. The market's not right, or you're not doing the right thing with the wood to make more value, and that's not my problem. And it's never been that way. There's never been something directly benefiting each nation's territory they were logging in. And still even more about economics. Like I look at our land vision that we've implemented with BC recently, making these protected areas. And our goal is to get the Kennedy Flats returned to us as a First Nation wood lot. And those have lower stumpage, which is what I'm saying. We need lower stumpage rates so you're not forced to log a certain amount every year. Or a community watershed or something. Get it?
Would they still charge stumpage fees though?
You know what? I don't mind paying stumpage when you fall a tree. It's just like having to pay to hold it and the right to. That's where I find that there's a problem. Then at least if you pay stumpage when you fall it, I need to do at least this with it to pay the stumpage and get a return. But
I'm confused that why would you have to pay a stumpage fee if it's now it's now Trouble Park?
No. So there's protected areas up in the old growth, but the Kennedy Flats we've designated as an interest to be a forest tenure.
So therefore,
only by Tla-O-Qui-Aht.
But so Ministry of Forests is still involved in that because of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be owned by Mamuk or Esauk. It would just be a Tla-O-Qui-Aht Forest Company. So all the tree farm in our territory has been returned to us either as a conservancy and we've said, well, in this Kennedy Flats, the second growth, we want to run a tenure. We don't want to log old growth anymore. And
then you would have the ability to like do that exactly how you wanted it.
Yeah, we hope to.
Right.
We haven't looked at the rents and the stumpage rates that would deal with that, but we do.
That still seems backwards to me. Like
I hope that it will be a good model. There's a few things in there. Like one, we still want the ability to have machinery to move big logs in our future. It's to keep the infrastructure a little bit of the foresters, and to diversify our economy somewhat. And we look at the Kennedy Flats, and steep land logging has a lot of risks, a lot of washouts and runoff and issues on creeks and rivers. But the Kennedy Flats, it's all got the road network there. We're handing roadside logging to our grandchildren. The highest, however long we let those trees grow to, we're handing the highest return tenure to our grandchildren. Flatland, roadside logging, which is pretty smart in that regard. And we hope that, in implementing these protected areas in the rest of the territory, Are there roads that are in those protected areas that need to be deactivated and tree planted and grubbed over? Spending 10 years in the second growth, yard hauling, spacing out trees. And I would hope that we would say, okay, we just spaced out all the trees in the second growth. We want to obligate all the bed and breakfasts to buy our firewood.
Mm-hmm.
This is about being sustainable in the region. Mm-hmm. This is not our ambition to have to do this. It's just, we've spaced all the trees to make it healthier, but we have a tree farm, or I don't know. I mean, I wish that this was the case. It unfolds like this, that look, we got all this. It's not the greatest wood. It's a bunch of small wood. We're just going to bucket in and require you bed and breakfast to buy our firewood. I don't know. That sounds a little weird, but 10 years of that, 10 years of closing off back roads, adding 20 more years of rings to the second growth. Hopefully now you can do like 5,000 cubic meters a year and just do a rotation through our woodlot, and we'll see if it ever gets there. I don't know.
That sounds like the ultimate kind of community forest plan. Like I love the idea of it.
Right?
I still don't agree that you should be paying stumpage fees to the government, but
hopefully you won't.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome thing. So talking a little bit about your land use plan, are there any points or any subjects that you kind of want to like expand on? Like, are you planning on doing like tourism stuff in like through the tribal parks? Like, you already have the Big Tree Trail, which is amazing for anybody who visits Tofino, Nutchicks. Check out that; it's epic. Like, do you have other plans? Like,
well, I touched a little bit on the road maintenance in the back roads,
right? Just for access to.
I would hope that maybe the community woodlot would be grading the roads for us, but I want that road graded from tourism dollars. And that it gets to Rainbow Beach. Our goal, so we've had a lot of illegal camping and risks. We had a forest fire on the Kennedy Bridge at Rainbow Beach, and
was that last summer?
Summer, yeah, and it's an incredible risk to our entire society, our livelihood and welfare, and we're not there for that. We will. And we thought that we can just get out every day and talk to people and educate them. And most people are compliant about litter and not trying to burn our forest down. But as soon as you leave at the end of the day, people fire up the fire pit. And the provincial management plan is to let people play hide and seek over 70 kilometers of backcountry roads and have fires anywhere. And we're going to gate those roads or deactivate them. And get them to Rainbow Beach where they can be monitored and managed. The best goal would be to have the province invest in a campground there where there's infrastructure, bathrooms, toilets, and garbage collection. Recently, when Rogers came through to consult about their cell towers going in along the Kennedy, we did ask that one of the conditions were that it would reach Rainbow Beach, that it would be from that mountain and shoot over a lake so that we could have safety when we're managing there. That's the other part. You can't go and manage a site and have a problem and not be able to reach anybody. I don't want to gate Kennedy and not have access to the backcountry. We're not trying to say no camping, but hey, let's have a camp spot where you're managed and there's a chance to make like nice private part, where you're not bumper to bumper with other, nice personal family camping, 100 camp spots in a nice campground. Where you look at where Kennedy Lake meets Clakewood Arm and it's a low flow river to the ocean. It's just mind-boggling beautiful, the two lakes joining up like that. And if you could have nice family-oriented campground where the road's graded to get there and amenities there, get us some cell tower connection and some stuff. And, that's a several $1 million campground that we're talking, but that's what I would like. I would like to see instead of mismanagement. And so there are that, when we get a longhouse going, we're able to survive with our culture intact. A museum in downtown Tofino would be a goal to repatriate some of this regalia that's been brought out to Chicago and New York and all these other museums and get some of those back. I could see these regalia that's could be pinned up inside of like a 4x4 glass thing that you walk up to, and it's there pinned up to look on a mannequin, wearing some of these ancient regalia that was taken. And I'd love to see that brought back into Tofino. And so there's some ambition for tourism, but managing it and stewarding the economy that's already here so that we're benefiting from it. I don't so much need to get ventures and entrepreneurs going. We need to resolve the current $400 million economy so that while they're here, something is left behind for the grandchildren. That if COVID hits and they just shut down the business and let's move back to Toronto. Well, while you were here benefiting, please become an ally and leave something behind for the grandchildren, for the Indigenous peoples whose backyard you were in for those years you were here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fully support that. I don't know what to add to that. You nailed that.
Yeah. It's a lot to take on. But it's the good, and we want to do it the right way. And I think we always want to be collaborative and form partnerships and work with people that want to work with us. At least that's the role I take on in our tribal park and our department.
Well, you mentioned earlier about people not thinking twice having to pay additional fees in Hawaii or New Zealand, but they're already you have at the top of the Kennedy Pass, you have the big sign welcoming you in. I feel like that makes this bit of a statement entering this new watershed, this territory. I feel like it's growing, that idea of it being it's in a way this kind of place outside of Canada, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. I would, in a way I've explained it before, even a little bit, like when you cross Sutton Pass and you feel like you've entered, you don't see a big tree till you make it home here. It's Cathedral Grove, but you drive from Victoria, it's all that CNN land. It's all been logged and portal burning, but then you get to Tofino, you get to our homeland and you see big trees again. But crossing Sutton, I want that feeling that you've entered a national park, Yellowstone style, big, huge.
Just put a big gate up.
Yeah. And, have a welcome figure or a carving at every hydro project, every hatchery, every pull-out should be a feeling that you're in a national park all the way in this tribal park. But each one of those carvings do cost money and such. So, it's a lot to take on. But I do steward a little bit of the tourism ambition and signage. We have been able to put some carvings up on the rivers and signage welcoming people to our hydro projects and such, but still more to do.
And how about from a restoration standpoint? Because I know with Redfish, we're doing a lot of work out in Hilsicles and Tranquil. What's the kind of objective with those different restoration projects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every broken river, in our visioning exercise, we've identified which river used to have what type of fish. And in Kennedy, there's Sand River, the Upper Kennedy Side Channel, all these different places that are in disrepair. There's no sockeye, yet there was canneries. There was 3 canneries in the region. Our nation did not even know what the Great Depression was. We were full of salmon. We were feeding the economy of British Columbia, sending cans and tons of fish from our rivers to Vancouver to be shipped everywhere. So we know that our rivers can be bountiful, and they're just broken still right now. Sockeye, there's no sockeye, and there's a stickleback that's proliferated. So we got to overcome the stickleback. There's different thoughts on that. Nutrient levels in the lake aren't enough to supply the sockeye, or maybe you just need enough sockeye to out-compete the stickleback. That will happen naturally if you can just give the sockeye a booster. Sand River it's called Sand River, but when they pulled the bridge out after logging, all the sand that got trapped behind it went and covered all the rocks and the pea gravel, and the river started to flow through the forest instead of in the river channel, and it's slowly getting better. But when I hear of a river like that, it's well, how many helicopter bags of pea gravel do I got to bring there? It'll never be lost on me that was our greatest sockeye run.
The Sand
Sand
wow.
River. It was a really good producer of sockeye, and so it's just never. Once we have created and solidified that vision, it's for us. It's never going to be off the record. It's never going to fall off the radar. It's something that we need to fund, and if we just had the resources, we would go and do all of those in each river.
And it goes back to what you were saying about the active stewardship that has always kind of occurred on these lands. Like you said, there was always a family in charge of like managing rivers, just doing things, tinkering with things to make it better for the salmon, to make it better for the forest. And it's just kind of like getting back to that idea, like none of this, like no more of this go in and take what you want resources wise, then like let it do its thing for like 100 years. Like we need to become active parts of these landscapes again.
Yeah, it when they logged them in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, clear cut and walk away. BC collected and benefited from all the stumpage from those great cut blocks that they did, but they didn't leave anything behind to go and rebuild the rivers. Or here we are writing grants to fix up these rivers that they collected all the stumpage on and benefited from, and didn't have the forethought to leave $1 a cubic meter aside to restore it later or to fix it. Or
and then all the companies like MacBlow, they're gone.
It's wild.
Yeah,
that's the wheel we're on. It's crazy to think that. And then to add the salt in the wound. Yeah, and then the companies that were there, they're gone. Yeah, so the accountability, it's not there. So you're left to deal with the province and hope that programs come along. And well, maybe it's ally programs that will help, not let the ball get dropped. This long-term vision that has been formed from tribal parks, knowing rich rivers used to have fish, and we'll never forget. We're not going to drop the ball. It's always on the radar that if we had money, we'd pull this project off the shelf and get on that.
There's a lot of this talk about like responsibility and accountability, I think, with especially in the realm of climate change. There's this analogy that I've kind of like worked out. I'm going to share with you. It's like you walk into your kitchen, right? You come home, you've been gone all day, you walk in, someone's broken into your house, and there's just smashed a big pot of spaghetti just all against the wall. It's all over the floor. There's just spaghetti sauce everywhere. And you're sitting there, you're like, what? Like you can spend hours, you can spend days trying to figure out who threw this spaghetti all over my kitchen, who trashed my place. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to start cleaning up.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of where it is. It's like the government could have done something in the past. They didn't. All these companies that existed that have now gone out of business, like we can blame them, but like we're not going to get anything from it. Like at some point we have to like recognize that it might not be our fault that we're in this situation, but like we have a collective responsibility to clean it up.
Yeah.
Because you got to live there.
You can't just not. And to know that it used to have salmon and doesn't now makes you want to go and fix it, regardless. And and for us it just shows even more so to people visiting here that the real stewards of the land are the nation and the people here. Corporate entities will take and leave and wrap up and close down, and then we're stuck holding the bag, and hopefully we don't have to keep seeing that. And
well, I mean, it's home. I think with a lot of those companies and businesses, like, and settler communities in general, like there's this overarching lack of home, for like a lot of people that have like moved here from other places in the world as a like way to find refuge or safety or opportunity or whatever it may be. There's still this like, there's longing for a place that they are no longer. And I feel like, like the more we can like recognize the need to let go of like the past for like settlers and like really make ourselves home and like be invested in the longevity of a community and like see yourself there for your life, your kids, and like think like that, because that just has been missing from this continent. Like there's always been more opportunity further west, you know.
If they don't like it, they can just move back to Edmonton, Alberta. But they're not saying I'm going to grow up here. I'm going to, I'm connected. I sat in on the First Nation potlatch. I feel connected. I donated to the nation to host their most recent potlatch or the Ally program, or invest in rivers.
Build that longhouse.
Yeah, the longhouse, and be connected to community. And I think our tribal park program hopefully will be the venue for that, for people, and the connection. We want to be celebrating allyship and lift them up, and be that connection point. That's what Tribal Parks was an articulation on how to share our lands. And think people, when they understand it and they could take that on, they would feel wholesome about living here and being part of the tribal park and advocating for their business as part of a tribal park. Then they might take on some of that pride.
Mm-hmm. Are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah, very. Yeah.
What can people do to help support the tribal parks?
I just want clients, when they're visiting Tofino, to be educated about ethical travel, and that they advocate for businesses that are, if they're not an ally, to ask them why they aren't. That they should support stewardship, and that their business benefits from the drinking water that was protected in 1984, and that they should know that the nation has foregone a longhouse and athletic hall, and rising tides should float all boats. And this rising tide of an economy was born by the effort of Tla-O-Qui-Aht and sacrificed by the Tla-O-Qui-Aht people. And some of the businesses owners, they're new here and they don't know. They weren't here in 84. But we hope with an educated tourist that they would be advocating and saying, I want to pay an extra $1 on a $100 drink tab to go home and say, I traveled ethically to Tofino and back. That's all I'm hoping for. More awareness of Tribal Park Allies, because it just strikes at the heart of so much. Tribal Park Allies supports tribal parks, which supports nice sharing of our lands. It supports stewardship. It supports longhouses, language programs, and it starts with allies. It feeds into so many more things, and that's why I can't end without asking people to just be aware of what Tribal Park Allies are and advocate for them and to feel good about paying a small extra penny here and there to support ethical travel.
Moving one step bigger, like for people who maybe aren't here in the area or are in the region, like what sort of advice or what sort of things would you say to people who want to support more projects like this all around Turtle Island? Yeah.
I can't think of an area in North America that there wouldn't be an Indigenous nation to relate to. I look at, like, I sit on board of directors, and we have a board meeting somewhere, and we do a land acknowledgement, and I try and ask them to do more than that. Like, it has to be more than just words. And you probably would have paid $400 to call an elder here to do a welcome and a blessing today. And that doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen because they can't get them, or it's a Saturday, or there's no one available. Well, why not just send $400? That's 10, that's not 5% of what it costs for your 12 board members and all hotel rooms overnight to stay there for that. You're spending $10,000. You can spend $400 and send it to the local nation whose territory you're in, and just say, here, we've sent you $400 towards your culture group. Every nation has a culture group. It's going to do good. It's going to go towards, potlatches, longhouses, language survival, jarring salmon programs, or it's going to, anything. It's going to go to good things. If you don't know what to do, how to engage a nation, put your money where your mouth is, not just a land acknowledgement. Your organization's protocol should be about those nations benefiting from your activities while you're there, not just thank you to whoever nation you're in. It should be more than that, because it's not about the money, but it does boil down to everyone's ambitions. Money talks. It costs money to do everything, whether it's paying a hydro bill or building a longhouse. The nations need, and it's to deliver services and infrastructure for nations. It's not a gravy train. It's meant to lift the nation up in self-determination, for the nation to be self-determining on their land. And so I can't think of anywhere in Turtle Island where you couldn't find the local nations that land that they're on, and hopefully send something to them while you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the places that you live. Is there anything, like, talk about wrapping it into like a property tax or anything? Like,
yeah, Victoria has one like that.
Oh, really?
Where I don't know if it's on the property tax sheet where you're allowed to say, this much percentage is sent to this charity, And then Victoria's created a society that the money goes towards like the 5 nations down there, Songhees, Saanich, or there's some type of new innovative property tax charity thing that it goes to, and it gets sent out to the 5 nations unquestioned.
Yeah, because like ethical travel and all that is great, but like ethical living where you are is also something that people should be buying into.
Yeah, we've had a couple people, you know, come in and they say, I live in Tofino, and you know, here's a $500 check, you know, I've just paid my property tax. I wanted to also come in here and pay $500, and a couple people do that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wish that was more commonplace, but
yeah,
it's already a struggle existing in these towns as is, so I get it. Yeah. So this Nerdy About Nature project, this podcast, it's all supported by folks on Patreon who sign up, and it's like a monthly membership thing. And as part of that, for every episode that I do, I make a donation to a nonprofit of my guest's choice. I didn't tell you about this before. I'm springing it on you now. But if you can think of someone in the region, a nonprofit or someone who would like to get the donation for today's episode, who would you pick and why?
Well, I probably couldn't go forward without advocating for our language program. I think our stewardship programs are pretty well, you know, going pretty good, but I know our language survival is this next thing to be just hanging on by a shoestring, yet it's so important to our identity. And I was sad to hear them having to lay people off, and this program's just been started. It's been 3 years running. We're hosting Zoom lessons on at night and reaching our people down island, and translating stuff, digitizing videos and translating them, like so much good. And it's part of our identity. So I certainly would advocate that it goes towards the Tla-O-Qui-Aht language program. There's charitable donee status that they're set up to receive too. So
I can do that, and I will put a link to that in the show notes for anybody else who wants to donate and contribute to that.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been awesome chatting.
My pleasure. Long time overdue. Anytime.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. All right, bro. Thanks.
Massive kleko to Saya again for taking the time to sit down and chat with me and share all of that wealth of knowledge. You know, it's always so great chatting with people who are so well-spoken and eloquent when it comes to conveying these really complex, nuanced issues and topics. So I really appreciate him taking the time to have a good conversation. If you want to learn more about Tla-O-Qui-Aht tribal parks, what they do, and find ways to support them, you can check them out at www.tribalparks.com. So this Nerdy About Nature project is supported solely by folks like yourself who enjoy it and support it on Patreon. And for every episode, I make a donation to the nonprofit of my guest's choice. And as you all are aware, Saya this week chose the Tla-O-Qui-Aht Language Keepers program. So I'm going to throw a link in the show notes here so you can all check that out independently and take a look at it and maybe hopefully support them, because I do know that they are in need of support. And today's donation is going to be going to that. If you're enjoying this podcast and all of the fun, quirky, goofy, educational videos I make all over social media to help kind of inspire and engage folks with the outdoor world to create a better, more holistic, you know, collaborative future for all of us, you can help support its production by checking out the Patreon page at patreon.com/nerdyboutnature. It's a quick monthly amount, however much you want to make, that kind of gives me the stability to keep on doing this stuff and ideally hire people to help and assist it as it all continues to grow. And if you're not into the monthly donation thing, you can check out nerdyboutnature.com, and I've got some, sweet merch and a one-time donation offer there. And all that goes into help supporting this project to give me the time, space, and resources to continue making it happen. So if you're enjoying it, I'd really appreciate your support. And if it's not for you right now, not on the cards, no worries. Just stoked you're all here, learning and enjoying this. So thanks again so much for joining me today, and I hope to catch you all next time. Cheers. This episode of the Nerdy About Nature Podchat series was produced by me, Ross Reed, and made possible with support from individuals like yourself. For ways to support this project and to learn more, check out nerdyboutnature.com or at nerdyboutnature on your favorite social platform.